All right, we will call this meeting of the Water and Sewer Authority of Calaveras County to order. First item on our agenda is a special recognition. Bob Ritchie told us late today that he had a conflict and wouldn't be able to make it. So we will recognize Bob at a future meeting. So moving down the agenda, do I hear a motion to adopt this agenda, March 19th board meeting?
Move. Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. Jennifer is on the Zoom call, just FYI. So she is attending the meeting. Can you hear us, Jennifer?
I sure can.
Great. All right. Moving some unfinished business, we have approval of the minutes of January 15th of the January 15th meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
I hear a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. All right, we have some reports. Chad, we will turn the floor over to you to give an introduction to our first report related to corn.
Yes. So I believe it was sometime around this time last year, I was approached by Corning with wanting to kind of have a discussion on the potential of them ultimately sending some flow to the Muddy Creek wastewater treatment plant. The first kind of steps of that involved some data gathering, sample gathering, kind of a little bit of an analysis. Is their discharge going to be something that our plant can even handle from a flow standpoint, from a makeup standpoint, from a whatever there? There still is a little bit of work that may potentially have to be done between the two of us when it comes to maybe a little more pre-treatment or a little something different that would keep it if it affected our plant if we ultimately take it at the Muddy Creek plant. But their situation down there is a little unique, as most of you probably are aware that they discharge their domestic flow currently to the Muddy Creek wastewater treatment, and their process flow, they have a direct discharge. And then those talks proceeded on, and then I guess probably 3 months ago, Jeff and myself were invited down to do a tour of that plant and to go over this data a little bit more. And at that, we were very impressed, obviously, with their operation, the little presentation they put forward to us. So with this kind of coming to the next steps of potentially moving forward, I thought it would be best to have them come, talk about their plant, give a little bit of data about what they're wanting to do, and an opportunity for us as a board to discuss and ask them questions. So with that, I'm going to turn that over to Ted.
Yeah.
And if you want to introduce,
Come up front.
no, you can stay there at the podium.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll let you explain. Okay, yeah, we'll start out with doing a couple introductions from our team. So my name's Ted Talarek. I'm the plant manager of our facility in Midland. I'm going to do a little bit of a overview of our plant and our division. Then I'm going to turn it over to Heather Avery. She runs our facilities organization, and she's going to talk a little bit about what Chad discussed earlier. We also have Jazz Tunnell. He's our government affairs director. Does a lot of work, and you'll see we have a strong presence in North Carolina. And then Rhonda's a new addition to our team. Rhonda Blake. She's our environmental health and safety manager. Okay, so obviously a big responsibility there between Heather and Rhonda to make sure we are good stewards of the environment. As Chad mentioned, we currently treat our own water and discharge it into the Rocky River. So I'm going to go through a couple slides, but just to reiterate what Chad said, I've been in the role for about 1.5 years. I've actually been with the company over 30 years. Started my career actually making optical fiber on the coast in Wilmington, North Carolina. So that is what we call our sister plant. So those are our 2 North America plants that make all the optical fiber for North America, and it's a huge market. I've been in the role about 1.5 years here in Midland. As Chad mentioned, we talked initially because we knew there was going to be an expansion of the facility about getting in and getting some reservation in there. And as we started to talk, it looked like there was some room in the existing facility. Heather's going to talk about that. So that's really why we're here to talk about is taking that next step at some point. So this is a little bit of a graph of our factories. So you can see optical fiber and cable, that's our division. We have the 2 fiber plants. I mentioned the one in Wilmington, the one here in Midland. We also have our headquarters that was put in probably 8 or 10 years ago. It's off the north side of town, right off 485. And then we have 4 cabling facilities. So over half of our fiber goes on a truck, goes up I-77 or I-85 to one of our factories up there. That's where they put it into a cable, and that's what you actually see outside. Right? You don't see our fiber. It's inside that cable. So if you can click to the next slide. Just a little bit of history. So this business, because it involves a lot of capital investment from our customers such as Verizon, AT&T, and now, you know, a lot of the companies you hear about with the data centers and artificial intelligence. We've always had a little bit of up and down. So this plant became the second optical fiber plant for Corning in the late 90s. So we broke ground in 97. And as soon as they started building it, we had a little bit of a slowdown. So it actually slowed down. But we started making fiber in 99. And then in 2001, we had a major correction in the business. This plant was idled. The plant in Wilmington was shut down for approximately 6 months, and then came back up at very low levels. That persisted for almost 5 years. So we had a small team there just keeping the HVAC running, protecting the assets, knowing that eventually we're gonna return. After kind of a slow, steady startup, it just really ramped up between 2012 and 2019. So you see the picture of the facility. A lot of that was just iron and steel. That all got filled with equipment. And then on the far left, you can see an additional expansion. That was the last expansion in 2019. So we are currently now the largest optical fiber plant in the entire world. That used to, Wilmington used to lay claim to that. Now we are, and we make enough fiber every day to go multiple times around the earth. That's how much optical fiber we make in that facility. If you drive fast and on 601, it looks like a big shell. There's a lot going on there, as Chad and Jeff were able to see here recently. The other thing we do is we make glass for our draw only facility. So draw is we take the glass and we turn it into fiber. We have plants in India, Poland, and China. All of those receive glass from our plant here in North Carolina. We have about 900 employees right now, and almost 2 million square feet of manufacturing space on 255 acres. You can see in the back, the very back of the plant, that's Heather's area. We have another 18 acres of facility infrastructure. That's where we bring in our raw materials, and then we treat both the gas and the liquid that comes out of our process. Okay, just a couple little snippets. I'm proud of our company. I'm proud of our division. We recently had the Washington Post come and do an article, did a lot of video. I know they interviewed also some folks locally. It was a nice article if you want to learn about, I call it the Reader's Digest version of how to make optical fiber. Google that article. It's a nice, very simple to understand article. We also, it's about 6 months earlier than that, had the 60 Minutes crew in, actually had live footage from our facility. So you can click one more time. As I mentioned, there's a lot of up and downs in this business. We are right now in a very big upswing. The plant is extremely busy. We signed a huge contract last year with a company called Lumen. So Lumen has infrastructure throughout the U.S., empty ductwork under the ground connecting all the major cities. And they have signed huge contracts with companies like Microsoft and Google and Meta to put fiber in there. We have a brand new fiber that allows them to put almost twice as many cables in the same diameter fiber and fill up these ducts, which have been in the earth for 25 years, so they're not quite round anymore. So they like the fact that our cable's smaller. So that's innovation both in our plant as well as innovation in our cable facilities. And then, you know, a big part of our business is the carrier. So AT&T and Verizon come to mind when you think about fiber to the home. Just signed a nice long-term contract with them. They are a key customer of ours, and really important to secure that long-term commitment for our plant and for our division. And then just a little snapshot. You can see, you know, we've grown a lot because of that. Our footprint of who we hire has expanded a lot. And I think in the early days, it was primarily, you know, Stanley County, Cabarrus County, a little bit of Northern Union County, and you can see how we really expanded. And this is just our hourly workforce, our production employees. But just to kind of a tidbit of where we do our hiring, where our employees live. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather, and she's going to talk a little bit about our process and a little question. Okay, Heather?
I'm going to apologize. I'm bearing with the pollen. I think I'm losing my voice already. So I just want to talk a little bit about our process at the plant and how we create water. So like Ted mentioned, we have various raw materials that come into the plant. We send them to our glass making process. They're mostly burned, and all of the off gases have to go through a scrubber system in our backyard, where we scrub the air and turn all of the impurities like the chlorine, HCl, into liquid. From there, we send it through a neutralization process where we obviously neutralize the water. It comes in at a pretty high pH. And then we currently pump it to the Rocky River. We also, like Ted mentioned, we have a sanitary discharge that goes to Muddy Creek. But what we would like to do is obviously stop our discharge to the Rocky River and pump directly to Muddy Creek with our processed water with our sanitary. So through some discussions with WSACC, we tried to understand the total capacity of the Muddy Creek facility. Just for your guys' information, we would like to send around 35,000 gallons per day of our processed water to the Rocky River. We understand that there's capacity being saved for some communities, and we definitely don't want to take any room from that, because obviously we like to employ people from the Midland area at our plant. So, but we did notice that there is some capacity for the 35,000 gallons, which still leaves quite a bit of room for any additional expansions of the town. And then like Ted mentioned, we do know about the $11 million funding request to get it to the 500,000 to 600,000 gallons per day. So just want to go over some of the reasons why we're really looking into this. We'd really like our water to be double treated. So we have a neutralization process that brings it to a neutral pH. We also remove some solids, and we monitor quite a few things to make sure that it is safe to go out into the environment. But sending it to a state-of-the-art water treatment facility would lower our risk to the environment, and also play into some of our sustainability goals. We also recognize that it would be increased revenue for WSACC. And then I kind of mentioned earlier also, we think this could really help with community growth. We have another project that we've been discussing with Chad about reusing the Muddy Creek discharge water. What we currently do is we have around 200 to 400,000 gallons per day, depending on winter or summer, that goes straight to a cooling tower. And what happens in a cooling tower? It all evaporates and goes right back into the atmosphere. So that's good city water that we're using in a cooling tower that, again, going right into the atmosphere. And we'd really like to partner with Muddy Creek, like I said, to use their discharge water, which would add more capacity to you guys, but it also will add capacity with the amount of water that you can supply to the city or town, since we'll be using it from Muddy Creek. That's all we have for today. Any questions, concerns?
Any questions?
I've got some, go ahead, Mayor.
You're first, you spoke up first.
I've just got some general comments. Doug Parrott, I'm the town manager of Midland. Myself and the town council worked to get that 11 million to expand the plant. Based on the last memo I received from staff here, there's about 79,000 gallons per day remaining. Taking 35,000 out of that would mean 44,000 gallons per day, which would bring the plant to 85% capacity, which is right in the middle of the 80%, 90% rule that EQ has when you have to start design and when you have to start construction. And with the 11 million in funding that we received from the state, it just makes a lot of sense to me, along with this request, that we move forward in expanding the plant with the same focus and same strategies that we used on the Rocky River plant, which was quite successful. I think that's good for the southern part of the county. It's good for both the town and the unincorporated area. It's good for our private sector employers as well. But I'd like to hear a little bit from Chad about your thoughts on that. and also from Jeff, since he's our utility partner in the area.
Yeah. If you don't mind, let me get a question to Corning first. What dictated the change? What, I heard you say you can make improvements environmentally and everything, but you've been doing this for now 20+ years. So what dictated the change?
Do you want me to take it?
All right, well, I can take the first step. I mean, I think for starters, it's just, risk mitigation for us. As she mentioned, double treating versus discharging directly to the river. It's probably number one. Not sure there's a close second. I mean,
So what I was gonna bring up is more of a volume for me. So about a year or two ago, we had a process that actually made our discharge closer to 80 to 100,000 gallons a day to the river, which we obviously would have never gone to you guys to take that amount of discharge. We knew that would take away too much capacity. But through some different projects and optimization of our processes, we were able to reduce it down to 35,000 gallons, which really opened up this conversation of, hey, why wouldn't we approach you guys to take some of this water?
I guess I was saying to myself, you acknowledged that you would be paying for this water to be treated. So you're incurring additional costs. And usually when most manufacturing companies incur additional costs, it's because something changed and they don't want it to be the same anymore, or it's not the same anymore. So I was just sort of curious. Is it all volume related, that the reason you're changing, or are there some process treatments that have changed so that the quality of the wastewater is different today than it was before?
The quality of the wastewater is much different than it was before. So with this new optimization, we were able to take out a ton of the chlorides in the water. And so that was a huge boon for us because of all the testing that we do. So we think it's already good quality water, but like Ted said, we really just want to be good corporate, or I guess citizens of the world. We're one of our big things that we promote here at Corning is sustainability. And the less that we can put into the environment really is a win for us.
Well, I applaud you for that. But I have a couple of other questions. So if the quality changed, so Chad mentioned a few moments ago that we still have a few wrinkles to work out with you. Are those wrinkles that we work out based on flow volume, or is it based on contaminant load from the effluent that you would be sending us? So is it contaminant issues that we're concerned more about? And are there plans for you to get those contaminant loads down lower than they are now? Or is that a number that we'll have to live with for all of the treatment that we're doing?
I think more discussions need to occur. I mean, we're open to adding more, well, I guess I don't want to talk and say what we're open to, but our loading of contaminants in the water is pretty steady. The plant runs pretty much full out. So what you see in the water now is what you'll see in the water a week from now, a month from now, and probably a year from now. We've shared that information with Chad. We haven't gone into details about if we want to do further treatment. I think we have talked that we know that we're going to be paying some additional money to WSACC because you guys are taking more volume from us. But we just haven't had those detailed conversations yet.
And I think a lot of that there would revolve around what ideal pH requirements do we have coming back? Is there alkalinity concerns that we have? Is there sampling testing that we want them to continue to do that we're a part of? You know, what type of monitoring and things do we have to see? Because we do, if this took place at a time when the plant was flowing 300,000 gallons a day, they would be a little over 10% of the flow. So that's a pretty significant a percentage of the flow to be a part of a plant this size. So we would obviously, also it would be something we would want to get involved during this design with our engineer. Are there things that they would want to design within the plant specifically to address any potential concerns that come from their discharge with the expansion? That that could be handled or could be done. So that would be kind of how some of that
Okay.
would interrelate.
So to go further down that path, so how long has it been that you've made the changes that you're talking about? So that the quality of water is better, different, more? How long have you been working on this, or is it just in the last month or two that you have been working this? And how much flux are you still in the process? Are we talking about it's going to take you another 6 months to get all the little details worked out? Or is it, no, we got them worked out. We just have been working on those for a year and we are now comfortable that we've got everything worked out? Tell me a little bit about where we are and where we're going, or maybe where you are and where you're going in
So-
terms of that.
So the project was completed a year and a half ago, and since then, we've been in steady state. So with any neutralization or water treatment plant, you probably understand we do have some upsets here and there where we do increase some of our water discharge, but they're very few and far between. It's maybe a 16 to 20 hour time frame where we'll discharge more than the typical 35,000 gallons. So we think we have all of the details ironed out. Like I said, we're steady state. You could take a look at our flow meters, and every day it's gonna be between 30 and I'll say 40,000 gallons a day. We have that process pretty under lock and key through a lot of different monitoring. I mean, obviously, you guys know we have a lot of permitting with the state that this project actually tied into. So we've really just tried making it better so that we have less water going to the river and less constituents like salt.
So this is the entire stream from your process stream. You're not talking about split streaming at this point in time. You're talking about the entire stream.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I applaud you for all of the good things that you've done. And I think this board is very interested in supporting manufacturing in Cabarrus County. So I would say thank you very much for the hard work that you all have put in. And I'm looking forward to helping serve you.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, go ahead.
And first, thanks for coming in. I'm Rob. I'm the town manager for Harrisburg, not quite as close as Midland, but the second best to your plant. So I'm sure we have plenty of employees. Matter of fact, my finance director's wife works for you guys, so we're pretty familiar with your facility there. And these are always kind of like depositions. So I hate when people have to stand at a podium and we're here throwing questions. So
This is daily life for us.
I'm not trying to trick you up or anything. I'm a civil engineer by nature, so most of my questions are technical. My first one's going to be for Chad though, which is there like we have a special permit for something like this? Is this a special discharge permit? How would this, if ultimately this works, how does this logistically get incorporated?
They would have a pre-treatment permit, just like any industrial, like Eli Lilly or the landfill, anywhere that's.
We're gonna have some limits on that with contaminants and.
Correct. PAs, flows, all that.
Upstream flow testing and all that. So, it takes care of most of it. And then have we had the opportunity to look at the current discharge permit on like
Yes.
what's going on? And that
Yeah.
seems to be in general.
Right. And we actually run the majority of all their wastewater samples at our facility, at the Rocky River facility. So our staffs have a relationship already, and we see that data. We run those samples. So there's a lot of familiarity there.
And then I assume you guys are saving some processes and money on this by being able to kind of eliminate this. I've heard you're saving on water. Obviously, you're gonna have some corporate sustainability
Mhm.
goals that you're able to meet and corporate citizenship goals, which are important in this industry. You build outcomes sometimes with high energy load users of your product. I'm sure that helps with that process. So, but that outside of it, I think I want to make sure I understand, what the mayor was kind of digging into there is that, what do we not know? I mean, I'm sure this helps you save money and it helps you meet those goals. Are there any risks environmentally to the plant that you would see, because you've treated this on site for a long time, sounds like it's pretty good water discharge. Is there anything that comes to mind to either of you that says, hey, you know, maybe we've got to get our chlorides down, or maybe, you know, we've got this one solid that we have to treat? What is it that we should be concerned about?
Do you want me to keep going?
Sure.
Okay.
Man. You're doing a great job, Heather.
Okay, great. So my group, I've got a few engineers in my group and we're always looking at process improvement. We've got a few different projects where we're always looking at our scrubber systems. We're looking at the chemicals that we're using for treatment. So we use caustic, hydrogen peroxide, and some sodium bisulfite. We're, like I said, always looking to improve. The less chemicals I can put in the water saves me a ton of money as well, which also saves the amount of chlorides or solids or whatever that I'm putting in the water. As of right now, I don't know of any environmental concerns, and I'm being completely truthful with you. I would assume if we went through with this endeavor, we would probably work with you guys pretty heavily on the different projects that we would try to implement. And like I said, one of the things that we constantly do at Corning is process improvement. And I think I've got the best engineers in the plant, so they're always looking for ways to save money and put less in the water as well. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that absolutely does.
But it does, you did have a situation instance shortly after the project over a year ago
Yes,
where you felt a toxicity,
we did.
correct? Around the same time, I think we did around that same time, didn't we, Chris? When was our failed toxicity?
August of 24.
Okay, so no, ours was not that long. It's one of those scary tests to run because you're trying to, we talked about the fleas at that time, as everyone can remember, that there's good fleas and bad fleas, and they're shaking their heads because they've been through that as well. So I think that was an eye opener as they had reduced their flows. You're concentrating flow. As you reduce flow, you're concentrating it, that it makes it that much more of a challenge sometimes to pass those toxicity tests. So I think with that, their flows reducing to a level that probably a local treatment plant could handle that flow, but then also the fact of that those tests are as challenging as they are, that it made sense. That's obviously something we take very, very seriously as well. But we've also seen instances where our plant this last August, we failed a toxicity. We pulled samples that next day or that same day, and they passed, you know. And so that is a test that can be very, very frustrating to not pass. But I did want the board to know that that was an incident that happened.
Yes, and just to clarify, we also took that extremely seriously. We opened up a whole MEE, which is where we try to get to mechanistic understanding of a problem. We had a dedicated engineer. We had someone from our division. Ted was very involved. So we took it really, really seriously, and did a whole green belt. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Six Sigma project on it, trying to figure out what caused us to fail that one point, because like you guys, we would pass the next sample that we would pull. And we haven't failed since. So I've got my engineers constantly working on toxicity because we don't want it to bite us. And it is one that I feel is very volatile. But like I said, we really haven't had any changes in our process water to dictate that we have an issue in that realm.
Yeah, just, you know, from a comment standpoint, I look at these very simple. I don't, you know, been in wastewater treatment for a long time. So typically there's not always like a winner and a loser in a situation. Most times this is mutually beneficial. It's easier to treat a lot of this at a central location. You've got more flow, more dilution. So that all makes sense to me. And then I just always are concerned with, you know, two things. You know, is there an environmental issue? You know, ultimately, is this better for the community as a whole? You guys are an important part of the community. You've been here longer than me. You've been here longer than most, and you employ a lot of folks here, and also, you know, produce a product that is very important to the country. So, you know, those are all good reasons to find a way to make this work. I would be concerned, and maybe this is just, you know, I still have battle scars from the Rocky River flow issues that we had, but I would want to make sure, you know, right now it's 35,
Yes.
but if you've got another couple of big consumers that come on and it's like, well, we need to get up to say, I would want to be ahead of it and try to figure out how do we prioritize making sure that we don't run out of capacity, not just for that area, but for Corning themselves, once they're brought on. I don't want to be the reason we're shutting a business down, throttling a business down, when you guys could have scaled up your processes. So I would want to make sure that one, we have that, that current capacity and future capacity and that we're just not ruining that plant with some contaminant we don't know about. But that really comes to you and your guys to advise us on that. So, but thank you. It was very helpful.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific time frame for when you would like to have this deal done? Is it open-ended?
Do you want
Sooner
me to
than,
go ahead?
Sure.
I will take it as soon as you'll give it to me.
Yesterday, that's always.
There's not a whole lot of changes we have to make on our end. Switch it over since we already have the discharge pipe headed up that way. Now, the second proposal about getting the processed water back, we understand that would be a big project.
Yeah.
Something we'd have to work together on.
Now, what is our timeline on,
no, you're good.
what is the timeline on the Muddy Creek?
All right, so now I'm gonna get to Doug now.
I know this has been discussed, but this is.
Josh had a question first.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No, because that you're tying directly in. So I'm not an engineer, I'm a builder. I put them up, I tear them down. I'm like the old Planet Fitness commercial. So these are probably more educational questions. So the water that you currently direct discharge to Rocky River, I mean, it's like straight into the river, or does it go into some sort of channel system that filters it even more? It's just right into the river.
Straight into the river.
So it's already great water.
I would say it's great water,
Okay.
yes. It's a little salty because
Okay.
of our process, but yes.
Okay.
It's treated to our permit standards for pH, which can be from 6 to 9. We monitor the solids, all of that type of stuff, so.
Okay, so I mean, this is already treated water. You guys are piping it right into the river. Sort of some of the questions I had that Chris was actually getting ready to hit on, I think we're in the same bandwidth there. You know, if it is something that is not necessarily needed today, is it something we can build into the design of the Muddy Creek expansion? If it's something that is needed today, how does that affect the Muddy Creek timeline? You know, I live in Midland, and so I've been to the town meetings about the budget awards or the state grant awards for the expansion. I know the town has worked hard on that. And I know that not just Midland, but the whole section of the county would benefit from this, especially even the unincorporated areas. I mean, I think there's some commercial properties that are down 601 or zoned commercial areas down 601 that would benefit potentially. And so I think this just sort of plays directly into what I think the underlying theme is it's not a bad request. It's a legitimate request, but I think it's probably highly indicative of the urgency that has been simmering for the Muddy Creek plant for a while now. And I think if it's not Corning, then it might be another commercial or manufacturing facility that wants to come in, and that will require this type of expansion and increase. So thank you. I'm learning. Everything I ask, I'm learning something, so I defer back to Chris then to go back. The timelines are.
Well, so I can jump in there. Since I took over in September, in this role, it's kind of been my goal and my understanding and talks with Mike, talks with Jeff, talks with members of the board as well, that with the $11 million available, there is no reason for us not to proceed with expanding Muddy Creek on a timely basis. There's no reason to delay it because the money is there. So we are currently within the facilities plan beginning that design process. So within the next month, we're going to be basically making the alternative selection of how we expand that plant. That will roll directly into as part of the facilities plan as the conceptual design. So that gets you to like a 15-20% conceptual design of what the expansion looks like. So when we talk about the 80-90 rule and stuff, we're underway on the 80-90 rule. The design of the expansion has begun. So we are moving along with that. The plan, obviously, this would be at the will of the board. This would not be my decision. This would come to the board. My recommendation will be that we proceed on this on a progressive design build, just like we did with Rocky River. That has worked very well. I don't know that it'll be the same team that we have currently doing that expansion, because that will go out to an RFQ process to make a selection on that team, if that's the will of the board. But that would have us moving into design build mode, probably dirt moving in 2026 for the expansion of this plant. One thing to be aware with that, as well as with the new state law that was passed late 24, early 25, we are allowed to allocate that capacity as long as we are under construction of that plant within 2 years of its completion. So that means that this should not be a 4 or 5 year project to expand this plant. This should be what do you think, Thomas?
I would guess once construction's underway, 1.5 or 2.
Yeah.
That's a guess at this point until we have the alternatives analysis.
Correct. So yeah. 319.
Back down, he won't sign it.
But that being said, what I'm getting at is that we're not looking at 2030, 2032, 2035 till capacity is available. We're looking within the next 2 to 3 years that capacity will be available at a minimum to begin allocating. If not, start flowing to at that time period. I think that makes sense. I think we're probably looking at expanding to around that 600,000 gallon range. So we have a 1 MGD permit. We're looking at doubling the size of that plant according to the master plan data that we have. That's the next logical step. According to our engineer, that's kind of the next logical step to go size wise as well. They looked at 450, they looked at 500, and they're like, that just doesn't get us enough time. 600,000 gets us a little bit more of a significant chunk of time. So Doug, does that answer your questions, or does that bring up more questions?
Brought up one more for me.
Yes.
So just to clarify, because I don't know exactly where we're at today, but it sounds like if you work out the details of an industrial discharge permit, which it sounds like that's pretty highly likely, you could accept this discharge today to that plant.
I think it would probably be my recommendation that we get at least to the fall, to where we have the conceptual design of what the expansion of the plant looks like. The board makes the decision of whether we're going to go progressive design build. We have a team on kind of selected, whether that's fall, winter, early 26, and we really know what that schedule of construction and bringing capacity on.
Yeah, I understand.
And I think in that,
but what do we have available right now?
okay, so there's 79,000 gallons available right now. Doug, do you want to speak about the projects that you guys have or does it make sense? Maybe come back next month and let's give some detailed information on what you've got.
I think that would be a
Whatever you
really good
have.
idea is for,
There's,
bring back maybe a presentation the next meeting, you and Chad, about, and maybe with Jeff's help too, about what's occurring in that part of the county and what.
I'd love to understand the pieces of how.
What's the short term?
That's where I was getting at with
pressures,
it, which
what's
is
the
like,
long-term pressures. Now we know Corning's request but I don't personally feel like I have all the data to make any decisions about what these pressures are. So I think we put it on the next agenda and then we come ready to dive into those details and understand them better.
But you can talk, I mean.
Yeah, you can give us a high level, but
there is documentation about that that's been shared between our engineering staff and the WSACC staff. It's pretty detailed. But with this request, there would be 44,000 left until more can be accepted. It would be really advantageous to get, that clarity.
Yep.
For all the end users that are in the middle of their process right now. I think that clarity is really important just to not create a finger pointing situation, to create a good situation for everybody. But I did want to hear Jeff's thoughts, but I do have another question. The plant gets expanded to 6. What's to stop Corning from changing their process and coming in and wanting to expand from 35,000 to 200,000?
Jeff, because we talked about this, Ted, do you want to?
Had a situation.
Because
like that.
that's my question that I had for you guys. You've had expansions 1, 2, and 3. Is expansion 4 coming? Expansion 5
If
coming?
you look at that aerial overview, there's not a lot of expansions left in our facility, and we're such a huge plant as it is right now. There's so many assets. It's a struggle to keep them all running from day to day. Now, that's not to say that we might do some smaller things, but there's not gonna be a huge in our facility. And if it did, it would likely be in the dry area, which doesn't with much water. And you can never guarantee anything, but there's definitely nothing in the plans for that.
You mentioned fluctuations. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Josh.
You just mentioned it real quick about fluctuations, and so I understand what the initial ask is. Is there just a plus or minus tolerance that you guys normally see on your current direct discharge flows? Is it jump 3% on a, in an hourly basis, or I think you gave a range of 16 hours or so.
Oh, I don't know the hourly discharge rate.
No, I get that, but hey, in
day-to-day-
this 24 hours, this might go up 3%, but it's gonna go back, or it'll never go up 10%.
So I can't say we'll never go up 10%, but like the way the fluctuations occur is like, say we had a solids upset. Sometimes what we'll do is flood it with water from our scrubber systems, so that can increase the flow. Or sometimes we might hold water for some reasons and then slowly discharge that water into our process. So it's all very monitored. I would say maybe it fluctuates 10,000 gallons a day. But generally, if we're running steady state and humming along and we've got no weird upsets with solids or whatever, we're right around that 35, I'll say 33 to 38,000 gallons a day. I would say 80 to 90% of the time.
And that would be addressed through the pre-treatment
Yes.
permit.
Yeah.
So a pre-treatment permit would be issued for them for a month, the average daily flow. We have the right within that to give a daily maximum, to give a weekly maximum. Those can be set up, but typically, and Chris, correct me, or Thomas, correct me, but typically we have a daily maximum and a monthly maximum amongst the monthly average day.
The limit's based on monthly average generally, and then some we add a maximum day, right?
Correct.
And I'll also add, with the capacity that we have in tanks, we would see a increase in flow way before it would actually happen. So if we, for some reason, said, oh, we're gonna be discharging 10,000 gallons more, I could easily call you guys up and say, hey, really just for the next 16 hours, because that's how large our process is from start to end, I'm gonna be discharging a couple extra thousand gallons.
It just, the last kind
More
of.
than that when it rains. It's not really.
Have you ever held water on site? Say you had an increase, right? You hit that 16-hour bump and you're like, okay, we have an extra 10. Do you ever hold it on site in any of your existing tanks and then sort of
Yes,
gradually release it out to the,
Yes.
to the right river as a way to sort of scale that down and reduce the impact?
yes, we have the capacity to do that, so, and that is part of some of our processes up.
Yes. Concord's, you're gonna be the retailer out there of this, right? So what's your role? Do you have a role in here? Do you have a?
Not really. I mean, other than the bill they're gonna get from us, and then we gotta pay the other one. I mean, I think the idea of, as we've considered private wastewater discharges with some new legislation that we've been going through, I think preventing and or removing is a very important public health idea in personally to me. I think they touched on it really, really fast about the potential reuse option later on.
Yeah.
That's a huge deal. Not only for that domestic water zone, but also fundamentally with our interbasin transfer stuff that we know is eventually going to run out and we're going to have to go back again. Reuse is a big part of that, is to be showing that we're making attempts, and this is a very unique opportunity to send it downstream just a little ways, treat it and send it back and use it again. It's a huge opportunity and just jump into Doug's question. You know, I think we fully support moving forward. There's been some water restrictions, if you will, in that zone that have limited a little bit of ability for things to happen. That is in the process of being resolved. So we think that there'll be a lot of opportunities down there. I think, to me, the biggest question is not when do we start and how fast do we go? It's how I think we need to legitimately talk about how big we go. You know, obviously we don't want to build capacity that's just going to sit around 20 years and not see a return on that investment. But we also know that now is as cheap as it's ever going to be. So I think that's an important discussion to have. Not sure where that'll end up, but 100% support moving forward as fast as we can. And I think it's great timing that we have a great corporate citizen that has a need that seems to work really well with facilitating this, and we've got some money to go along with it. So it feels like the time is right.
I would have another question for you. I'm assuming, since you said you'd like to have it now, your current infrastructure to the plant from you to us is adequate to handle this extra flow that you're talking about. You don't need 6 months to add another line or to upgrade a line or anything like that. You currently have your infrastructure needed to transport.
Our sanitary line from like our lift station to you guys, I believe, is an 8-inch line. So that's more than enough to
That's
handle.
more
the
than
flow.
enough. Yeah.
What I would need to do is install a line from our process water discharge to our sanitary discharge line. And that's probably a 30 to 45 foot distance. I would also need to put some controls in there so that I can divert and do all those things that you guys would want us to do for some outlying reason. But none of that would take very long to do. Ted just has to give me the money.
So let me ask one more question about that. You were talking about occasionally you might have to flood the system in order to get the neutralization that you need and to reduce the salts that are being produced. If the flooding was large enough that it made it difficult for us, as Josh was talking about a moment ago, to take it as quickly as you want to send it to us, I'm assuming you're not going to do away with your NPDS permit. Would you ever consider splitting it at that point and putting some of it back into the original NPDS discharge so that you didn't necessarily cause us a problem? Is that possible?
I'm not the permit person, that would be Rhonda, but I think all options are on the table. I would not want to get rid of our ability to send it to the river. It's another, I guess, risk mitigation for just in case you couldn't take our water. I have to release water so that I can keep our processes up and running.
Right.
So I think there's definitely a happy medium that we could come up with, whereas maybe we're going to discharge you guys 35,000 gallons and that's what we're going to normally do, but we keep this permit with the river at some point for maybe a year or two, just to make sure that we're copacetic. And then maybe ultimately down the line, we end up removing the permit that goes to the river.
Thank you.
Chad, do we have some EQ down there or no?
We do. We do. It's pretty small. It's 75,000 gallons a day. So it's pretty, I mean, it's 75,000 gallon tank. So it's pretty small.
So let me ask about that. If Mayor, to your point about splitting, how would that look if there was a situation where you needed to discharge back into the river? Is that something that could happen immediately, quick?
Yes, that would be all on the controls that we install. I haven't fleshed it out, but I assume I would put some type of 3-way valve in there. And then we would tie controls into probably our process parameters, our flow meters, totalizers. But like I said, I'll know hours in advance before I start sending you guys too much water. And we would probably open some discussions of, hey, yeah, we're not receiving as much as we normally do today. Can you take an extra 30? And generally it's not an extra 30. That was an over exaggeration, but, or yes, could I open my diversion valve and it could be done in seconds.
Or there might be a requirement to notify a deaner during that period of time to let them know that you're gonna be using the other.
Yes, something like that, yes.
Well, I think that would be important to have in the discussions. And then let me ask you about your timeline. If, you know, we were to grant the capacity, you know, immediately. You had mentioned, you know, having to put in another line. You know, I know you said be rather quick, but are we talking 1 month, 3 months? Just since we have the timeline, we understand the timeline on the expansion of where that would be putting us of.
I would say, I don't know what the cost to dig and put a CPVC line is in the ground is right now. I don't know if you guys have. So what I'm trying to get at is I don't know if I would have to go for like a capital request with Corning or if it's something that I can work within my budget. I would say I could do it within 3 months, so.
Have you guys quoted any of that work or preliminary?
No, I have quotes for valves and the controls portions just based off of other projects we've done. But like I said, I haven't installed piping in the ground in a long, long time. And maybe I would still put it above ground and that would make it much cheaper. But that's the one thing I don't know yet.
Has there been a volume number discussed on the reuse side? You know, ballpark?
So we use 200,000 gallons of water in the winter and 400,000 gallons of water per day in the summer. We will take whatever capacity you're willing to give us to supplement our cooling powers.
Yeah, it could be significant.
And I still was trying to understand, get a little more clarity on the why and the incentive behind the now versus waiting and potentially next year when the plant expansion will be underway and ground would potentially be moving. What is the urgency?
I mean, my urgency would just be costs. It would be cheaper to do it now, like you guys are saying, than later. And Ted, you can tell me if I'm speaking out of turn. I'm okay to wait 1.5 years too. I've been putting water to the river for the past 30 years. So we can wait another 1.5 years. But like I said, if you'll grant it, I'll take it.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we talked to Chad about 1 year ago, that was the intent of the discussion, was to get in on the expansion. And then we realized that I forgot to mention what Heather mentioned, you know, the process change we made showed that we could fit in there. So that's when we started having the discussion. I think what we talked about, you know, a month ago was you probably feel more comfortable having a good timeline before you'd want to commit. Obviously, we need a couple months as well.
I think it's agreeable to all parties in my discussions that we've had there is if this could happen by this time next year would be Corning would consider that to be very positive, very good. And we will know a lot more information as WSACC as we get towards the fall and winter. It gives them, I think they really would like to know, you know, a nod, an agreement like sooner than later that this can happen, that this is agreeable. And a lot of that would be some final checks with our staff on the quality, make sure everything's kind of dotted, I's are dotted, T's are crossed there. Then they can have some time to put in their infrastructure. We can have times to analyze the schedule of the expansion, kind of what's going to take place there. And then we can make an unrushed but wise decision on the timing of that. They've expressed since day one, they want to be good neighbors. They want to be good citizens of the area down there. So they're not wanting to step on anybody and hurt anybody if they can. You know, they just want to find a path that works for everybody.
Has there been timing discussed on the reuse side of the equation? Is that going to be tied into the plant design? Like, how does
Yeah,
that,
so
how does that work?
that right there has not been flushed out as well. So that's one because that's one that it's obviously a win-win for both parties. But it's also one that creates a challenging business case if you just want to look at numbers of, does this quote unquote make anybody money? Reuses, it's kind of like fixing eye and eye. It generally doesn't pencil out real cleanly or real well. So that's something that we would have to flush out more and be a part of. And what it would be is, it would be most likely a side stream process that you would pull off a portion of your discharge that's going to the river and do a little bit more further treatment to that. You would have a storage tank on site, or you would have pumping to a storage tank at their site, but you would have somewhere that you have a ground tank or an elevated tank that's being operated, figuring out where does the line stop that it's WSACC water and it's Concord water, and that would all have to be determined and figured out what happens there.
Since the line coming from them to us is gravity, we'd have to pump it the other way because
Yeah.
we'd be pumping uphill. So there's a
Correct.
pump station involved.
Yes, yes,
And so who incurs the costs associated with that? And is there a rate?
yes. So that's what would have to be all flushed out of who makes it. Does Corning make a capital contribution to cover some of that? Do we cover all that cost and then we assert a rate that can recoup that cost? What does that business case look like, and how does that happen? Is there the potential with this being a reuse project that's really good for our area, involving a huge company to gain some grant money or some different things? You know, what options are out there would have to really be explored. I don't think I would want to tie that directly into the expansion of the Muddy Creek to 600,000 gallons a day, because I would not want to muddy that and hold that up. I would rather that be able to take place as a parallel track with a separate engineer kind of going through that of what that looks like, if that's the path we
No
decide to
pun
go.
intended, but muddying that up. right?
No, we do not want to muddy up Muddy Creek any more than we can.
And I'm hearing Concord's in support because of the supply
Sure.
discussion, because I know there's a revenue aspect to that, you, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're, you know, the bit, we don't know what the business case is. I mean, we know that generally, I mean, that water is sometimes more expensive than potable, but there's a corporate belief here, I think, at play. There's the IBT requirements. There's the that far down in that zone, having that relief. You know, redundancy is a big thing to them, making sure they have a reliable supply all the time, because a shutdown of their process, as we saw firsthand, is absolutely catastrophic. So I think all those issues kind of go together and make it a very unique opportunity. This is something we're trying to do with our new industrial partners in our system. So to have an existing facility that's interested in making those things potentially a reality is phenomenal. You know, it has to be done. It has to be a certain scale to be able to even pull it off. And, you know, we've looked at reuse for water and golf courses. We still don't use enough water. You got to have just that constant cycle, that constant use 24 hours a day, and they're just perfect for that.
And he skipped over the one bullet on the slide, but their entire production floor area is temperature, humidity, and pressure controlled, correct? And so that's why in the wintertime, that's just a huge, massive.
Our
And how many furnaces are there that are operating? I mean,
We need a lot of heat just to cool it down.
and so,
With our cooling water, it costs us a lot of money. We don't even want to have that discussion.
Yes.
We have diesel generator backups for power. We have a lot of infrastructure.
And what did you tell us? You were Duke Power's largest
Yes.
largest customer in North Carolina?
Are there any manufacturers in WSAC service area that do the recirculation or reclamation, or is this a brand new case study?
There are some that do some in their own footprint.
Okay.
I don't believe we have any that are publicly, you know, reused and create a product to sort of resell.
Gray water up at the. But it's not big enough, and it's not this kind of volume that she's talking about.
All internal, yeah.
So Jay, I think I've heard everybody else say it here, but I'd certainly support, this project and trying to find a way to make this work, and I would just rely on staff to go back and figure out the details on that. In the context of what Jeff said, though, that I too want to make sure we get it right on the sizing of the Muddy Creek plant, separating, recirculation, reuse things.
Yeah, I think we need to add to the next agenda discussion, or an upcoming agenda, whether it's the next meeting or an upcoming meeting, that gets a handle on external pressures to that part of the county and what short-term and long-term, have everybody understand that. And then we know Corning's need, try to get that into a package we're all comfortable with.
We kind of need to see that area for Concord, you know, what do you have on your sewer allocation down there? And what do you have on your not sewer allocation that is kind of planned for that same area? So that, as Mike said, we can kind of understand. I don't want to run out of capacity out there, certainly.
And the timing is critical to understand everybody's short-term needs. That's maybe more important than long.
Maybe 600 is the perfect number, but after we get all this together, you might take it back with Thomas and go, maybe it's not.
It's too high or too low.
Well, I think it's valuable information for us to have with our discussions over the coming months as we're making decisions on Muddy Creek. And I think I'm kind of hearing from you guys that we want to proceed with our staff getting even more involved with their staff, just to dot i's and cross t's. So that's done. So we will get that underway and continue that effort and move forward with that.
One final thing. I know I think they're at the very southern tip of the water system.
Yep.
And you said they're drawing, did you say 100 to 200 a day?
They're more than that. They're probably a third of that whole zone's consumption in certain times of the year.
And so if we talk instead about reuse and pumping back from the
Yep.
southern side to them, do we need to look at, does that change the hydrological model of the water system down there? You know, what is the impact of that?
Yeah, I would think it would do nothing but improve, you know, when they, you know, they have on-site tankage and things, and we can certainly see when they're pulling pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So reducing that draw or shaving those peaks down, I think would do nothing but improve. We do have a water contract with them that talks about volume, so we would, you know, if that did take place, we'd probably have to re-examine those agreements to understand what those new limits are and what the commitment to purchasing the reuse to make sure we have all that locked down.
We're in this weird situation with our basin where, you know, our basin goes from Annapolis to Wilmington. And we're the highest growth until we get to the coast. So it's like most of our water is going to have to be transferred because it just nothing's falling in our basin until it gets past us. So anytime we can reuse anything in here, it might not make a great business sense on the front end. The fact of the matter is, we physically are not going to be able to build any more reservoirs or anything upstream. It's all going to be.
Well, and I mean,
Ken.
Concord and Kannapolis committed to these things as part of our IBT. We not to the letter, very specific, but to always pursue these options. So,
And I mean, a couple 100,000 gallons off of the potable system could push upsizing and infrastructure investments 20 years, you know, out of the future.
Or could lessen the demand at another partner that we're getting water from, so that we don't have to have them upgrade their facility to produce additional water. It's like Albemarle is talking about at their plant already. So it could put that off some, so that they wouldn't have to be building that expansion on their water plant.
And their greatest demand is during the most critical time for a water system during the summer, hot heat of the summer. So that's good, because that would help dramatically during that peak flow days. And that's what everything's dictated off of. So, I mean, a lot of us probably won't be sitting around this table, but at some point, our communities will be going back for another IBT, most likely. Hopefully that process has improved some at that time, who knows? But a big, huge portion of that is, what are you doing to be smart and wise with the resource that you have? And that's a critical aspect of it. And if you don't appear to be being wise and conservative with what you already have, it's going to be more difficult to get more. So I think it's a great potential opportunity. So,
well, y'all nice folks heard us talk about a lot of stuff that didn't have to do with the members here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I would like to say, I'd love to visit your plant and have a tour of your plant if that would be possible. I don't want to violate any secrets that you have, but
Absolutely, reach out.
it's amazing.
Yes.
I've been in lots of manufacturing plants in my career, so I'd love to see yours too.
It's an interest, again, I say I'm biased, but it's an interesting So.
Board meeting.
We'll get in touch with you in the
You
next.
certainly know a lot about your process.
There's no sand involved. Everybody wants to know where else
That's right.
sand comes from making glass. We don't use sand.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
You.
Yeah, if you end up setting something up, I'd love to see. I'd say.
Yeah,
We just talked about maybe we set up a tour before a board meeting. Maybe have our board meeting at the at Rocky River.
Being in our place, and
We can do that.
Yeah, we have a big conference room, so
We might do
take
that.
us up on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, good discussion. Thank you.
Any other discussion about any of that before we move on?
That was interesting though.
All right, Thomas, we're gonna move on wastewater flow acceptance update.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I have a capacity update overall for you this evening. This is based on some end of year data, that we collected. We'll go through that process just a little bit, but. Okay, thank you. Don't have our normal clicker here, this evening. But the flow allocation and capacity update process, which, you know, we've kind of touched on a little bit already in some discussions this evening, is broken down into a couple of different basic things. And this is a review, I know, for many in the room here. But initial flow allocation for individual projects. So when a project's completely designed, it's ready to go, the member jurisdiction has figured out all the little intricacies that go along with that. That comes as a flow allocation request to WSACC from the member jurisdiction. So if there's 100 home subdivision, that'll come and say, okay, we've got 100 homes we want to build, they're 4 bedrooms each, here's the flow allocation that goes with that. So that is the initial flow allocation that goes into a giant spreadsheet. And then we have 6-month project updates with member jurisdiction staff. Because wastewater capacity is a limited quantity overall, we want to make sure that we're recognizing those projects as they come online. So in June, a couple of years from now, when 50 homes out of that 100 home subdivision have been built, the member jurisdiction would report that to us and we would adjust that down to 50 so that we've got that recorded as accurately and currently as possible. So we do those updates once every 6 months. And so we just did a set of updates in December 2024. So those happen in June and December and do those for both plants. So first on Rocky River Regional Wastewater Plant, the overall capacity there that's permitted right now is 30 million gallons per day. We are under expansion, under construction right now to go to 34. So our 2024 calendar year actual flow was 22.24 million gallons per day. So there's almost 8 million gallons per day between those two numbers, between what the actual flow is coming in and what the permitted capacity is. That number that's the delta between those two is divided into two different pots. And so it's what we call developer controlled capacity, which is capacity that's been officially allocated to specific projects through that flow allocation process. So that 100 home subdivision example that I talked about would be in the developer controlled capacity once it has flow acceptance. And then jurisdictional controlled capacity, that is the balance of that number to get to 30. And that is the capacity that's currently available for allocation. That's distributed among jurisdictions. The interlocal agreement comes into play and those sorts of things. So that number, that 3.329 number, that's the current number as of January 1st, is capacity that's available within Cabarrus County for allocation to the Rocky River plant. Charlotte Water also has allocation within that. Their developer controlled capacity is about 1.4 MGD right now, and their jurisdictional controlled capacity is right around 1 million gallons per day. Similarly, Muddy Creek has a current permitted capacity of 300,000 gallons per day, or 0.3 MGD. Again, we're in conceptual design with that, with the wastewater treatment facilities plan to go larger with that plant. So the 2024 actual calendar year flow was 197,000 gallons per day. Again, the delta between that and 300,000 is either developer controlled or capacity available for allocation. So developer controlled about 24,000 gallons out of that, and capacity available for allocation, like we've mentioned earlier this evening, is around 79,000 gallons per day. right now. So flows at the Rocky River plant over the last several years, looking from 2018 to 2024. We've had an increase just over 2 MGD overall during that time frame. This is variable based on rainfall and a host of other considerations, along with growth in flow coming to the plant. So for that time period, if you take 22.24 minus 20.07 and just average that over those years, the annual average flow increase is about 362,000 gallons per day over that time frame. And again, the current permitted limit up there of 30 million gallons per day is that red line across the top there. So similarly with Muddy Creek, I have the same sort of graph from 2018 to 2024. The annual average flow increase over that time, if you just take these numbers, 197,000 minus 140,000, divide that over the number of years, that comes out to about 9,500 gallons per day over that time. And then current Muddy Creek permitted capacity being 300,000 gallons per day. So looking in developer control capacity, just a little bit more detail here. The Cabarrus County current developer control capacity at the Rocky River Regional Plant is right around 2 million gallons per day. Just under 1 MGD of that is residential capacity allocation, and just over 1 MGD of that is commercial and industrial capacity. Again, Charlotte Water has an overall developer control capacity of about 1.4 MGD at the Rocky River plant. That's mainly residential for them. And Cabarrus County to Muddy Creek, developer control capacity of about 24,000 gallons per day. Most of that being residential, almost 23,000 gallons, and then about 1,300 as commercial or industrial capacity. So this includes projects from over the span of time. Some of these projects date all the way back to 2017. These are a small percentage of projects overall, but some projects do take a while to come online, just depending on the nature of the project and how aggressive they are at building from there. So this graph looks at cumulative residential building permits. That's the green line on this graph, and cumulative residential flow acceptance request. So if you have trouble with colors like me, that's either red or brown, depending on how you look at it. But what this is looking at is over time, 2017 through 2024, how fast were we seeing residential building permits within the county as a whole? And then how fast were we seeing residential flow acceptance requests as a whole? And so you can see 2017 through 2019, those two lines track pretty evenly with each other there. In the 2020 to 2022 timeframe, the flow acceptance requests were coming in at a faster rate than we were seeing building permits for residential construction during that time. 2023, they were about even, and then in 2024, the flow acceptance request came in at a slower rate for the residential connections relative to the building permits that we were seeing during that time. So residential percentage completed per year, there's a ton going on in this graph. But what we do is every 6 months, we do have a set of updates for projects that already have flow allocation. So if you look at the blue line here, that blue line is for 2021. And so that's the percentage of residential projects that are completed for each year, or each 6 months rather, as it goes along, you know, as those projects basically, as the flow acceptance on those gets older, if you will. So you can see it's been 3 to 4 years since projects were accepted initially in 2021. And so about 63% of those projects are built at this point. And that leaves about 930 dwelling units. That's total for apartments, townhomes, single family homes that are not yet built. Another thing you can kind of see from this graph is that between, you know, you don't get a lot of progress towards 100% in those first couple of years after a flow acceptance is approved on the average. Some projects do go much faster, some go much slower. But between that 2 and 5 year time frame, you're jumping from about 20% complete to almost 80% complete during that. So one thing you can see here, if you total up all these numbers, that are off to the right side, and you consider the residential flow acceptance request we received in 2024, there are about 4,800 dwelling units that currently have allocation that have not yet been completed. So this is a similar graph except from the commercial and industrial side. So we split that out. The previous graph was just residential. This one is just commercial and industrial. Generally, these projects come online much faster. So once final design is done, these are completed very quickly. So this would include things from, Chick-fil-A up to a large industry. So, as you can imagine, if the Chick-fil-A gets capacity, they're probably looking to build very quickly. So that's kind of what we're seeing here. Again, typically those come online pretty fast. So a few notes here. The residential developer control capacity for Cabarrus County is a total of about 4,800 dwelling units as of January 1st of this year. This is evolving all the time because we're getting flow acceptance requests all the time. About 37% of Cabarrus County projects that were approved in 2021 for residential projects have not yet been completed as of January 1st of this year. We saw a rate last year, an average rate of about 190 residential building permits per month. And that's about 25 months. If you divided 4,800 evenly by 25, you get to that 190 number. Again, that fluctuates all the time. That's just one example from one static point in time. In 2020 through 2022, as we saw, the rate of residential flow acceptance requests outpaced the residential building permits. The overall trend has reversed for 2023 to some extent, and you could see it in 2024. And then just again, another look at capacity here. The Rocky River plant is currently around 74% of its permitted capacity, and the Muddy Creek plant is around 66% currently, with 2024 annual average flows relative to its capacity. So that is a ton of data. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
So you tracking, or maybe what are we seeing on the delta of once things do come online? And what do we see treated at the plant versus what we had on paper?
Sure. Our best data point for that is probably the master plan we recently completed. Black and Beach took a look at that. It is really hard for us to figure out on an aggregate level because so many things are happening at once. Rainfall's happening, droughts are happening. Everything's all kind of coming together at once. But for a 3-bedroom home, let me get a 4-bedroom home, that's allocated at 300 gallons per day. What Black and Beach per home, what Black and Beach found was we're around 150 gallons per day or less for the actual flow that we would expect to see on the average off that home.
So, and again, I know there's a lot going on. You get a wet year and you don't even see it in the data.
Sure.
But if we've got 3 million gallons of residential developer controlled allocation out, by the time they come online, we would hope to see 1.5 million of that reallocated back out to the member jurisdictions because the flows didn't show up at the plant.
Yes, with absolutely everything else being.
Yeah.
So
lots of caveats
Right.
and asterisks and everything.
Right, so we have about 2 million gallons per day of developer controlled right now, about 3 million gallons per day of jurisdictional control capacity. So of that 2 million, some of that with the commercial and industrial capacity is probably a lot closer to the actual value, but the residential, we do see a sizable delta there.
Thank you.
Thomas, I'm sorry. Thomas, if we look at 34 as being the ultimate number, because that's all we got at this point in time, until another train comes on board to get us to 48 or 50 or whatever it happens to be. Have you done any estimation of when those lines get close together of, based on the current rate of building, the current rate that we see usage taking place? As you said, it speeds up in year 3, 4, and 5. Have you done any predicting when those numbers are going to get close together again? Because we've all said that we probably are never going to get to the next train being built and utilized before we might have this one utilized. That 34 is going to be gone or committed to fairly quickly along the way. Have you got any predictions about that?
Sure, so the master, again, I would go back to the master plan with that, and we developed the projections, or Black and Beach developed the master plan projections with input from member jurisdiction staff, so that was a very collaborative process. I can't remember exact years right now, but we are tracking towards, with all of our efforts currently in progress, having sufficient capacity to handle those actual demands over that time. So I could get back to you with more details on the specific years and everything from the master plan, but.
So what I was hoping that you would say to our board is 34 is going to last 2 years past the end of, or maybe I should say, when the housings continue to grow, we'll still have 2 years of free time, because that's about how much time it will take to build the next plant after it's been permitted along the way. And without having to go into a moratorium during that interim, I was hoping you'd tell me, oh, we can get past the 34. We'll be 2 years down the road before we'll consume all that 34, is what I was hoping I'd hear from you.
Well, sure. I mean, again, with the projections, the way those are built out and the way the planning years are into that. And again, I would have to get back to you on the exact years, that Black and Beach have for each one. But we are not projecting hitting that capacity limitation with those moving forward.
That's great.
And I looked at some of that, and rough numbers, when the 34 is complete, there will be about 9 million gallons difference between what Cabarrus County is utilizing.
That includes the paper or the developer committed. That does not include.
That doesn't include the paper. So that would be what we're actually using. If we say that our flow is going to be about 23 MGD then.
Okay.
So we're going to go from 22, we're going to be about 23 in a couple of years. We don't know,
Right.
but if we say that, then when we get to 34, Charlotte's going to be 7.4 MGD of that. So that takes us down to,
It'll be at 8 then for 34.
that's right, there will be at 8, excuse me, at that point. So that would take 8 off of that. So that would take that down to 26. Okay. But then we have to take their flow off of that 23.
Right.
Okay, which is a 5.5. You end up with about 8 to 9 million gallon a day spread between those two.
And we
That
have to,
doesn't include any developer controlled capacity. Okay.
and we'd have to take off the difference of those that get to be operational, where it's at half the rate that we're having to count them
Right.
as paper
Right.
capacity.
So the big ugly monster that we deal with is this paper capacity
Yes.
and the fact that being accepted at a much higher rate than actual flows.
Right.
Because what you see, we're going to be almost 11 million gallons, 34 MGD plant. We're probably going to be flowing about 23 MGD. So we're going to be about 11 million gallons of capacity available between there. And we've been increasing at about 350,000 gallons a day. So if you do that math, that's over 30 years of capacity. Okay?
Right.
It's not that simple
Yeah, right.
because of that paper capacity and how much that eats up at a higher rate. It also eats it up if you have an extremely wet year. Because I go back to in 2017, all the data that we had said we had 26 years of capacity. Then we had 2 extremely wet years in a row, and we didn't have capacity.
Right.
So it's almost impossible to say.
Well, I think too that those lines finally crossing
Yes.
is likely the first data set we have on this new allocation environment. Like, and it's, when I think about some of the things the legislature is trying to do to potentially unwind this allocation strategy, I mean, if we were required to go back first come, first serve tomorrow because of some legislative action, you're done.
Yeah, you're done.
The projects fly in and we are done. We're sitting on 6 million in developer capacity for the next 10 years.
I mean, our list, we have 19 subdivisions that are just on a waiting list. So that all,
You do too.
and
You do too.
So it all goes away if it's first come, first serve immediately. I mean, it's done.
So what it shows is those permits are still, that line was almost completely straight. We're approving less, but we're still building at a consistent rate. And as long as that continues, that it will make that stretch this out, which is what our goal was
That
to
made
be.
me feel better.
I agree.
That line flattened out
I agree.
compared to the consumption of existing already. That makes it much better.
It didn't go to zero.
Yeah, yeah.
It just got a little
The
slower.
key is to convert the paper capacity to real flow as
Yes.
fast as we can. The sooner developers get that off of our books, the quicker. And that's a challenge right now we're seeing, because there's projects that, and we're seeing it in the past 6 months, we're seeing projects that aren't getting to the finish line we thought they could get there as quickly as they could, for a whole host of reasons. It could be nervousness about the economy, it could be, who knows, but they're hitting some brick walls, and it has nothing to do with us, it's just general thinking. And we have all this paper capacity sort of just there, and it needs to get used.
Well,
Because then we get more capacity when that happens.
as Jeff said earlier in the discussion, that's the reason we can't land bank capacity. It has to be usable capacity. That is, we want subdivisions who will be completed as quickly as possible so that we can have that change over to 50% of the usage and doing that. So land banking is just a horrible word for us in terms of the future.
Educational question, sorry, Rob.
No, go.
Just so I can understand better. Is there a reason why we give such a big cushion of 200% of maybe what the actual is for a residential house?
State regs that.
Oh, that's a great-
We have had, it has improved.
Yeah.
It has
Okay.
it's gotten better.
To be twice as bad as it is now. Yeah. It used to be.
For an example, a 4-bedroom home was 480 gallons per day allocation under the old rules.
Okay.
And it's now 300.
Okay.
So it's much better. It's not all.
We
the
think
way
it should be lower.
Matches up.
But yeah, we put brick walls.
Like I said, educational. Great.
But part of that capacity is for wet weather and other things, so we get it. I mean, there's a reason that.
Right.
People said it's too big.
But Josh, the more we prove that the number is half of what the level that we're required to maintain, the better case we can make, it give us another adjustment.
Draw that in even better.
For our legislators to help us make that work.
We need a retirement or two at the state.
How long is your allocation permits? 2 years?
So the expiration, the initial
We need to
expiration.
tighten that up or to revisit some of that.
Well, that could be, that'd be, at the board's discretion,
Yeah.
but the way the current policy is, from the time that flow acceptance is issued, the, constructor of this development has 2 years to start construction, which is defined as grading and significant progress, relative to water and sewer.
We give them 6 months.
Maybe we should
We do
shorten
too.
that.
So, that may be a future board discussion we ought to have about tightening that up, because it's just not fair for a developer to hold on to it for 2 years and you have 10 that are ready to go today. That's just, and I get the economics, but we just might want to think through that, because it's,
Especially with towns are forecasting, tax revenue and
yeah.
all those other increases along the way.
But Chris, we realize that makes your life more miserable, because the faster we make them build them out and complete them, so we have more capacity, the more likely somebody's coming to you, say, I need a school.
That's exactly right. That's what I was sitting here thinking. I understand the arguments on both sides, but that's where my mind went on that.
That's where these two things, we got to find middle ground and all that. Good discussion. Any other questions for Thomas?
If anyone would like this presentation, just to have it.
I think send it to the board.
Okay.
I'd love to have it.
That would be
Yeah, we'll
great.
do that. There is a lot of data there to really get kind of digging into. And if there's anything that you think I'd rather see it this way, or we'd like to see this information, we can always.
Stand. I thought it was good.
Yeah,
Good
I like
data.
it. Good.
Thomas shows 3 shades of blue on one chart for a guy who can't see color here.
If you need some plans review, go to Thomas. If you need color coordination information, don't go to Thomas.
I don't think we select colors. We worked that out a long time ago.
All right, Thomas, you got the next report, Lake Cal Dam Gate. Not Dam Gate.
Yeah, that's a dam.
It's a challenge putting this presentation together, figuring out just those sorts of linguistic tricks. But recently we have rehabbed the gates at the Lake Howell Dam. So this was born out of a condition assessment a while back. And so Schnabel, who was our consultant for that, noted some surface rusting and some deterioration on the gates. So we did initiate this RFQ to recoat the gates, working with an industrial coatings manufacturer. So for that, you know, we had to lower the gates, lower the water level out at Lake Howell. You know, there was pressure washing, sandblasting, all of the QA and QC work, and all the coating thickness testing. So, you know, it's something substantially more complicated than, you know, painting an office, for example. Those gates were installed in the early 1990s when the dam was constructed, excuse me. We reached out to 4 companies during the RFQ, and CMT was awarded the rehab project for that. The contractor was on site in November to begin work, and you can see the lake level here as it had been lowered to allow them access to those gates.
And just for reference, those are 5, we can see kind of there, those are 5 feet tall and 75 feet long, 100 feet long.
Something like that. I don't have the length in my head.
So pretty significant chunks of steel.
And Thomas, we had a couple of years ago, a failure of a lift. And has that already been finished and
Yes.
taken care of? And so this is just coating.
Right, this is just the coatings work. We did go through, as we were raising and lowering gates, we were doing that a lot more than we normally would for this activity here. But did go through, kind of double check the hydraulics and have that hydraulic partner that we've got come out and look at it with our staff.
Okay, good.
So we, again, had to lower the gates so that they could have access to the backside of the gate here where you see the guy doing some pressure washing in the far right-hand side. So they had to have access to those, the full extent of those gates. And to what Chad said earlier, that meant lowering the lake level around 6 feet total to give them a dry environment there. We did have the coating manufacturer rep on site periodically to take a look at things. So again, the coating application went well overall. Holiday testing is what the fellow is doing here. So you're using an electric current to identify whether there are any pinholes in the coating you might not see. So obviously we didn't want to redo this anytime soon. And the coatings that were out there had lasted for quite a while, and we wanted to have the same quality product here, if not better. So this is a great picture to have here. It's the lake within about a foot, just a little bit more than a foot of full pond. So lowering the lake is always anxiety producing sort of thing. And we were happy in some ways, you know, with lake level here to see the heavy rainfall events in February that helped us out a good bit. So substantial completion was at the end of January, raised those gates at that point to allow the lake level to fill. And thankfully had some good rainfall in the meantime to help with that. So it's within plus or minus about a foot of full pond.
Was that a 1 coat application or 2?
I think it was 3. So we had, there was, Kevin, do you know for sure?
No, I don't.
Okay, so there was a primer and then the epoxy coating on top of that.
Any other questions for Thomas?
We were very happy to get the gates up and to see some rainfall. I will tell you that much. So very, very happy.
Okay, we'll move some new business. Kevin, you're going to talk to us about engineering for concrete repairs at Lake Howell.
Sure. Perfect segue for me as well, being more dam work. So good evening, Mike. Kevin Loesch is my first time up there as well. It's nice to work with all of you. So I'll be presenting on the design services for the Lake Howell Dam, the concrete repairs, and the GPR study as well. So just a little background to add on to what Thomas said. The dam was constructed in 1993. It is an earth embankment dam. The primary or the principal spillway is the concrete portion that we're going to specifically be looking at. There's an auxiliary spillway with roller compacted concrete, and then an emergency spillway that's just vegetated. So those are some quick facts. I also wanted to go through a little of the background of this project and where it came from. In June of 2024, we received a report from North Carolina Dam Safety that cited some cracking repairs or minor cracks and then some spalling in the concrete spillway or the principal spillway. Following this, WSACC contracted with Schnabel, our dam engineer, to evaluate that cracking area as well as the roller compacted concrete sections. So that report was furnished in December of 2024, which brings us to today. So the proposal I'm talking about now, we received a month or so ago. And it's split into two main tasks. The first task is specific to the principal spillway, and the second task of this proposal is specific to the auxiliary spillway. So I'm going to talk about task one and then talk about task two. So task one's kind of split into two main portions. The first portion of that task one is actually the field study focused on that principal spillway. So WSACC in combination with Schnabel will actually perform field visits to identify the cracking that needs to be repaired, and then also identify any spalling issues. And on top of that, Schnabel will also be performing percussion testing. So all percussion testing is you're sounding the concrete and listening for any hollow sections. And then we'll use that information to combine it into our plans and specs and eventually put that project out in bid. So that's task one. Task two is specific to the auxiliary spillway. It is a GPR survey, ground penetrating radar. And all we're doing is looking for voids in that lower compacted concrete section. And those are the two main tasks. The deliverables for task one, like I said, are plans and specs. And then for the GPR survey, there'll be a report as well identifying those voids. So it is our recommendation to move forward with this design proposal from Schnabel. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. And at the end, we are seeking approval from the board for design engineering services for Schnabel. Do you have any questions?
Questions for Kevin? Do I hear a motion to approve the award of engineering design services for this project?
So moved.
Motion, do I have a second? Second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carries. All right, Wendy, we need to pay for it.
Yes, we do. So, the budget amendment attached will appropriate fund balance for $130,000 to pay for that we can approve or sign the contract and pre-audit it. That's meant to be approved. Budget amendment.
So this will not go through the lake management budget?
Yes.
Correct.
It does come out of Lake Howe.
Okay.
Yes.
Question about the budget amendments?
To approve, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
A motion to approve budget amendment? Second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carries. All right, Wendy, you also have some policies you want us to adopt?
Yes, the state has told us that we need to adopt 2 additional policies for our ARPA funds. We, as you know, we received over $2 million or $42 million in ARPA funds. And these 2 policies, there's nothing new that we're not already doing. We follow the state retention policy before this policy, and this is basically just saying that we'll keep the grant information additional 5 years after it's completed, and we'll have it even longer than that. Everything is scanned in our financial statements or our financial system, and also have everything where we ask for requests, or everything's sort of double. I have 2 places that I keep it. And then the internal control policy is, like I said, it's not anything new that we are doing. The audit, when our external auditors come, that is like one of the main things that they're looking at is our internal controls. So it's just basically putting it in a neat little package and a policy approved by the board so the state will.
All right, so we have 2 policies in the pack. Anybody have any questions for Wendy?
Make a motion to approve.
Got a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those policies are passed. All right, auditor contract, Wendy?
Yes, in January, I sent out RFPs for our audit services. I sent it to 4 auditors as well as put it out on our website, so anybody was open to submit an RFP. Out of the 4, 1 declined, and then I received 3 RFPs back, and Potter & Company is the lowest bidder again, and we do have a good relationship with them. We've used them about 10 years. That is our recommendation, that we continue to use Potter & Company as they are the lowest bidder. Any questions? And to approve this and approve the audit contract also.
How long have we used Potter?
About 10 years.
Any other questions for Wendy? Do I hear a motion to award the audit contract to Potter & Company?
So moved.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion is seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carries. All right, let's move to the budget. Ted, turn it over to you and Wendy.
All right. Well, I'm happy to be here presenting my first budget that I guess that Wendy and myself directly are responsible for putting together. Before I get started, I want to give a huge shout out to our staff, like the managers and directors I've gotten, the level of detail, almost sometimes to an extreme, but not the level of detail that we get back with this budget is great. And so there is a lot of work, as we all know, that go into putting these budgets together, and they really did an amazing job. I'm going to follow the board's lead here a little bit. I'm definitely going to run through a discussion of the kind of the executive summary here, but then I'm going to follow the board's lead of how much we want to go through the budget or how much we want to leave it to the board presentation that you guys, or information you've been giving, you going through on your own, and then us having a later discussion during the public comments or discussion at any time over the next month. But there are three major areas that have impacted our operating budget and probably impacting most of all of our budgets. The one being, first being hiring and retaining good employees, good competent employees. During the current year that we are in, we implemented a salary study that was approved by the board to increase our pay ranges more towards market. And we're also asking in this budget to kind of keep it market rates, to include a cost of living of 2.9%, and also include a merit increase of up to 5%. What we budgeted, that would be an average of around 4%. That would not be a 5% average raise to employees. It would be around 4%. Is that correct, Wendy? Yes. I will say that we have seen very positive results from the salary study that we've seen in the level of candidates that we're getting to apply for jobs, the retention that we've had of our existing employees, that we have seen very favorable results from that. The second significant item impacting is debt service. We're recommending to follow the lead that as the board had done on previous borrowings, with beginning to phase that impact of those rates in over a multi-year period. So the debt that's associated with phase 4, the 84.96 million, will result in a net increase of debt service for this coming fiscal year of $704,000. That's actually a third of what the actual amount is going to be. So on phase 3, the board elected to do that over a phased period instead of having a one-time hit of a multi-million-dollar increase to the budget that increased rates dramatically in that 1 year that hit. So that is the method that we have proceeded here as well. The third will be operating costs for chemicals and utilities. We obviously see annual increases in those. Chemical annual increases have been pretty significant, but we also right now, with operating the plant during the expansion, as we've discussed, are operating fairly inefficiently because we're essentially operating two plants at the same time. We're operating the new Aeration Basin 6 as a conventional blower plant, which is about a third of our capacity right now. The other 2/3 are running on the previous high purity oxygen operation. With that, it does make us a little inefficient as we move through this. So what we have recommended doing is allocating some fund balance, some reserve balance to cover those costs there, because we recognize them not as a long-term cost increase, but as a cost increase that we're going to see over the next couple of years as we move through this expansion. So we did allocate some reserve money to cover that. So after all of that information, pulling all this together, we're recommending a 1.52% increase in the variable rate as shown there. This will have a 14-cent monthly impact on an average residential customer. So a pretty nominal change there. The proposed FY26 operating budget is $28.325 million, which is a 7.8% increase, or $2 million more than the prior year's budget. Again, we're looking at increasing the rate to 1.87 per 1,000 gallons of treated wastewater. Wastewater volumes have increased from 6.98 to 7.39. I followed a fairly conservative method as Michael had in the past, but probably a little bit differently forecasting those numbers than he did. So that did increase that number just a little bit more than potentially he would have. But it's still, that number represents an average daily flow of under 21 million gallons a day. And as you said, as you've seen, we've been over 22 million. So it's still a pretty conservative number should we enter a period of very dry weather or reduced flows. This does include flows from Charlotte Water continuing to be reduced. We have not seen a big impact from that yet. That was reduced with them constructing the Clark Creek pump station to pump some of their flow that was coming to Rocky River back over the ridge into a plant in Charlotte area. They are operating that plant, but not to the level that they were anticipating that they were. So we have not seen the reduction in that revenue in the current year that we are in. But we are moving forward with the assumption and they're trying to work out their bugs that they're going to be able to get up to that. So we did keep that reduction in there. I am recommending increasing the septic hauler rate from 7 cent or from 6 cent per gallon to 7 cent per gallon. This is a very significant revenue stream that a lot of people probably don't understand, of about $500,000 a year of septic hauler revenue that comes into the wastewater treatment plant. Thomas, can you scroll up a page?
Back a page or?
Oh, yeah, there you go, right there. All right, so operating expenses have increased by about 8.65% or 1.3 million. A good chunk of that is driven by salary impacts, as we all see. And as I'd outlined before, we're looking at the 5% merit increase with an average of about 4 and the 2.9 CPI cost of living adjustment. We're also going to see an increase in our contribution we have to make to the local government retirement system from 13.6 to 14.38. So that's about a $42 million impact there. Utilities are increasing by about 12.85%. Some of that is driven by just an increase in utility usage, utility rates, but also, as I said, of being fairly inefficient in the way we're operating right now as we're having to move through this expansion. Chemicals, again, annual chemical costs hit us every year. That's part of that 29%, but a big part of that 29% is the construction impacts. Insurance also made a significant increase there. A lot of that had to do with adding our phase 3 assets, which were obviously are very significant with the cost of those. All other line items, not including those, represent a pretty minor increase of $78,640. The debt service fixed charges, as we talked about earlier, we have had 2 major borrowings that we've been underway here in the last couple of years, one being the phase 3 borrowing of $65.5 million, then the phase 4 borrowing of $84.96 in February 24 is now a cost that we will start incurring within fixed costs, and that's at $704,000. We continue to be pretty conservative on system development fees. As you've seen, that the line that we were looking at has stayed pretty consistent, but we've kind of got a feeling from hearing back from our jurisdictions and others that may slow a little bit. We just don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty, I think, financially in our economy right now that maybe has some people on hold. So we decided to stay pretty conservative with those system development fees at 3.2 million estimate there. The Lake Howell budget. The Lake Howell budget has an increase from 319,000 to 335,000 gallons or dollars. This will be split up among Concord and Kannapolis for the operation of the reservoir. So with that, we do have a lot of challenges that we're trying to meet right now, both mainly with finding and retaining and keeping good employees, and we have some great ones. So we really want to continue to stay focused on that, but really the construction that we're underway for the next couple of years is going to be our biggest challenge of trying to mitigate that impacts to the budget. As I said, we have budgeted some retained earnings to cover those costs. That is not a huge number. What was that? What was that amount?
375,000.
Yes, so it was not a massive amount of money. I mean, a lot of money, but not according to the level of our budget. But we did budget that just to minimize some of that because we do feel that will come back in line more once we fully complete the expansion in 2027. So with that, we have more slides that we can go through that kind of gets down into the weeds of some of this. You guys have been supplied with that to look at your pace if you would like. It's really up to the board of how much you want Wendy to kind of start going through some of that. We're happy to.
Historically, this has been pretty much the extent of our budget discussions, at least at the first meeting, but so if you're comfortable, we leave it at that unless the board wants to dive deeper in this setting. Certainly at the
Are you
next
going to
meeting.
be acting now, or are we going to be acting, we have to have a public hearing
Correct.
and then act at the next meeting, right?
Correct. So we have the next month for this to be reviewed. Any questions to be asked of Wendy, myself, that we can certainly, anyone that wants to have a one-on-one meeting, we can establish a work session if we would like to go through in detail. It's up to the will of the board of how we proceed with that.
I don't have a desire to do a work session. I looked at everything, and if I have any questions, I'll get with you offline. Of other members, I mean, I know some of y'all are more involved in the rate impact. If y'all want to have a work session, that's fine, but one less meeting for me, y'all appreciate it. I'm okay.
Anybody, that's been historically, that's been what we've done. So unless anybody has any objections, we'll leave it at
I'm
this.
fine meeting with Chad as long as, I mean, I've got 2 or 3 concerns that probably require some modification in here. I don't want to necessarily wait until the last minute in the meeting.
Right.
You know, you're the director.
Right.
The board has to make some of those decisions. But I'd rather,
Okay.
I kind of understand them and maybe I move off my position or maybe you do yours, but.
Okay. Perfect. We can do that through Zoom. We can come over and sit down, however you want to do that.
Yeah.
We can
just
definitely
meet
do
up.
that. Perfect.
All right, well, we'll leave it like it is, and we do need to go ahead and make a motion to set the budget public hearing for April 16th. So got a motion, do we have a second?
Yep.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? All right, that's set for the 16th. Okay, Chad, some general updates?
All right, we've had a long meeting, so I'm going to keep this quick if that doesn't bother anyone. Really 2 things I wanted to mention. One, we had a really fun event at WSACC back on the 19th of February. It was actually when we were supposed to have our board meeting, our snow day that we missed. We had the first annual WSACC chili cook-off down at the wastewater treatment plant. It was an idea brought up by staff. It was set up, run, everything by staff. It was a lot of fun as management to be able to go down. We weren't even judges. We did get to give a vote, but we weren't final judges. But it was a great time. We had 11 entries, I think. When you only have 59 employees, we had 11 entries, which was great. And it was a really good time. And so I just want to bring that up. I'm hoping that becomes kind of an annual thing because it was a lot of fun. It was a great day to do it because it was cold and everything. So just wanted to mention that. The last I want to mention that I was afraid about a week ago that I was going to have to come have a talk and it wasn't going to be a fun talk because we've been having a lot of struggles at the plant at Rocky River from a treatment standpoint. As all of you know, us wastewater geeks can get in the weeds really quick, and luckily everything is turned around and really operating very, very well. But I mainly wanted to give a shout out to the staff and our engineer Brown and Caldwell for the level at which they work together and the amount of work that they put in over the last couple of weeks to get our plant back in line. Great news out of that was our new aeration basin 6 through the whole process ran like a Cadillac. So our new aeration basin just ran great. The existing plant that we're upgrading right now is where we had the challenges. And some of that could have been self-inflicted. Some of it could have been just the fact of what we're trying to go through right now. But the fact that that stage had already always worked as a stage 2, now we're a fully parallel plant. First really cold winter going through this process. We had some challenges on that side, but we did not go out of compliance. And we are back with numbers that look really, really good, but it is because of a huge effort by our staff. And so I just wanted to recognize that, to you guys and let you guys know a little bit of the ugliness that goes on sometimes that we have to do to keep things happy and keep things moving. So that's all I have tonight.
Okay, all right. We will, at this stage of the meeting, open up the floor for any public comments. Anybody here that would like to speak? All right, hearing none, we will close that portion of the meeting, and we do need a closed session. Do I hear a motion to go into closed session under GS 143, 318, 11, A1 and A6?
Moved.
Motion, your second? Second. Motion to second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. All right, we are in closed session.